Imagine running for your life through a burning forest, the heat scorching your skin and smoke clawing at your throat. Then, through the flames, you see it, a dog, trapped, whimpering, eyes locked with yours. And in that split second, you walk away. Sometimes, the hardest decision you'll ever make takes just a second. And sometimes, it's that 1 second that will haunt you for the rest of your life. This story isn't just about a dog in danger. It's about a man, his past, a decision he couldn't undo, and a truth that will make you see the world differently. Stay with this story until the end, because what you're about to hear will break your heart and maybe even put it back together again. You never expect to be tested in a moment that looks like a scene from a nightmare. It was the tail end of summer, and the woods in Northern California were dry, too dry. Locals said it hadn't rained properly in months. Trees were thirsty, leaves were brittle, the air smelled like something waiting to burn. Jack Delaney wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the forest that day. He was just passing through on his way to clear his head, trying to escape a fight he'd had with his brother the night before. Their argument wasn't even about anything big, but you know how things go when emotions build up for too long. Sometimes the words that come out aren't about what you're fighting over. They're about everything else underneath. Jack needed space, time, quiet, so he drove into the mountains. No reception, no voices, just trees, wind, and whatever was left of his thoughts. But something felt wrong. He first noticed it when he stepped out of his truck. There was a strange thickness to the air. Not quite smoke, but close. The kind of scent that makes the hairs on the back of your neck rise, even if you don't know why. He stood still, and then, in the distance, he heard it. The low rumble of something moving, fast. Not a car, not wind. It was the unmistakable crackle of fire, catching dry brush, and dancing through it, like it had something to prove. At first, Jack froze. It hadn't hit him yet, but when he looked up, over the tops of the trees, he saw it. Thin lines of smoke curling up into the sky, getting thicker by the second. Panic hit like a punch. He jumped back into his truck and turned the key, heart racing. He didn't even know how close the flames were, but he wasn't going to wait to find out. Gravel shot out behind his tires as he sped down the dirt path, steering around potholes and fallen branches like a man possessed. But then he saw it. Something moved on the side of the road. Jack slammed the brakes. His truck skidded slightly before coming to a stop. He leaned forward, squinting through the smoke, and there it was, a dog. Small, maybe a mutt, caked in soot. One of its back legs clearly hurt. Its fur was matted, parts of it singed. It was whimpering, not barking, not growling, just crying. It wasn't running. It wasn't even trying to hide. It looked at Jack like it was already done fighting, like it had already given up. Jack's hand was still gripping the wheel, knuckles white. Smoke was getting thicker now. The edge of the fire was coming fast. He could feel the heat even inside the truck. Every instinct screamed at him to go. Now, this wasn't a time to be heroic. It was survival. But that dog, it wasn't just the way it looked. It was the way it made him feel. Something twisted in his chest. Something he didn't want to feel. Something sharp. Guilt. But here's the thing about guilt. It's not loud in the moment. It's quiet. It whispers. And in that split second, Jack told himself the lie a lot of people do when they're scared. There's nothing I can do. So he looked away. Just for a second. And then he hit the gas. He didn't look back in the mirror. But you don't outrun that kind of moment. You can try. Jack did. For the first 10 minutes, all he focused on was the road. The way the smoke was fading. The way the sky turned back to blue. The way his chest slowly stopped pounding. But his mind, it wasn't behind the wheel anymore. It was back there, on the side of that road, with that dog. He tried to distract himself. He turned on the radio. Nothing. Static. He tried humming. That didn't work either. Every time he blinked, he saw those eyes. He told himself, there'll be firefighters. They'll get there. They'll save it. They always do. But the lie started to rot the second it left his mouth, because Jack knew the truth. That fire was fast, and that road was remote, and no one else had been around. That dog wasn't getting saved, unless he went back. An hour passed. Jack reached a ranger station, a small outpost by the road with a couple of trucks, a radio tower, and a handful of people in yellow fire suits, moving like bees around a hive. He got out of his truck, breath shaky. A young ranger, maybe early 20s, ran up to him. Sir, you all right? You just come from the North Road. Jack nodded. Fire's moving in fast from that direction, the ranger said. We're trying to send a team to check if anyone's still up there. Did you see anyone? Jack hesitated, and then he shook his head. No people. He couldn't say it. Not yet. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in a borrowed cot at the back of the ranger station, twisting a bottle cap in his hands, replaying that moment again and again. The look in the dog's eyes, the heat, the sound of whimpers getting swallowed by fire. Why couldn't he just open the door? It would have taken seconds. The next morning, the fire was mostly contained. The forest, however, wasn't the same. Blackened trunks, ash floating in the wind, smoke still curling from tree roots, like ghosts refusing to leave. Jack couldn't take it anymore. He got back in his truck and retraced his steps. He knew the road, knew the exact curve where he'd seen it, knew what he was going to find, or so he thought. He pulled over where the dog had been, his breath caught. There, where the ground was scorched and the air still stung, was something he didn't expect. A tiny patch of dirt that had been dug up, a shallow hole, and next to it, a small bundle of something, charred, blackened. Jack stepped out, legs weak. As he got closer, he saw it. It wasn't just one dog. It was two, a mother and her pup. The one he saw was the mother. The pup was barely the size of a football, curled into her belly, like it had tried to hide there when the fire came. She hadn't been trying to escape. She'd been staying with her baby. And Jack, he'd walked away from both of them. He dropped to his knees. The weight of what he'd done, what he hadn't done, came crashing down on him like the fire never could. This wasn't just about fear anymore. It was about choice, and how sometimes the choice not to act is the worst kind of action there is. Jack stayed there for hours. No words, no sounds, just wind, ash, and grief. But here's where the story takes a turn you might not expect, because just when Jack thought the guilt would swallow him whole, he heard a sound, faint, barely there, a whimper. He looked up and saw movement near a fallen tree. In a pocket of earth untouched by flames, something crawled out. It was the pup, alive, burned, weak, barely breathing, but alive. Jack ran. He picked it up, gently, carefully, wrapping it in his flannel. Tears streamed down his face as the little thing nestled into his chest. She had survived, not because of him, but in spite of him. And now, he wouldn't fail her again. Jack couldn't sleep that night, not because of the distant sirens still echoing from the woods, or the images of fire dancing in his mind, but because of the eyes, the dog's eyes, those helpless, burning eyes that had pleaded with him in the middle of that flaming forest. He had walked away, chosen to save himself, chosen silence over action, but the guilt wasn't silent. It was screaming inside his chest. And the worst part, he didn't even know if the dog had made it. The next morning, the air still carried the bitter taste of smoke. The town of Hollow Creek had changed overnight. Ash-covered porches, trees stood blackened and cracked like skeletons. And at the local cafe, the only thing people talked about was the fire. 27 homes gone, someone whispered. 3 hikers still missing. Jack sat at the corner table, hands wrapped tightly around a mug of cold coffee. He wasn't listening. He was staring at the woods through the foggy window. It was like something was gnawing at him from the inside. He tried to shake it off, but guilt has a funny way of following you, even when you run. That evening, the news broadcast showed drone footage of the scorched forest. Firefighters had pushed deeper into the burned zone. That's when Jack saw it. For less than a second, a flash of fur, charred, shaking, small. The reporter's voice cut through the silence. Rescue teams have recovered a severely injured stray dog, presumed to have been trapped during the wildfire. The dog was found near the same location where the fire first spread. A miracle, really. Jack's heart stopped. It was her, the same dog, the one he had left behind. She had made it out somehow, but the footage showed her collapsed near a tree, motionless. Vets were trying to revive her on site. She was in critical condition, and that's when something strange happened inside Jack. For the first time in years, Jack felt something that wasn't cold or numb. It was responsibility, maybe even redemption. He didn't know why he did it, but within the hour, he was at the local animal rescue shelter, asking about the dog. The receptionist looked surprised. "You mean the wildfire dog? She's here, but she's not doing good. Burn wounds, dehydration, infection." Jack's throat tightened. "Can I see her?" The woman paused. "Are you a relative?" Jack hesitated. "No, I'm the reason she's here." She tilted her head. "Excuse me." Jack didn't explain. He couldn't, but she let him in. The dog lay wrapped in bandages, barely breathing, and 4 dripped slowly beside her. The room smelled of antiseptic, wet fur, and something else, loss. Jack stepped closer. She didn't move, but then her eyes opened just a sliver, and they met his, the same eyes. But this time, there was no fear, just silence, and maybe something like recognition. Jack knelt beside her. He didn't speak, didn't touch her. He just stayed, for hours, and when the vet came in later, he asked one question. "Can I take responsibility for her?" They named her Ember. Fitting. Jack visited her every day, He paid for her surgeries, her antibiotics, her recovery crate, her food. He didn't know where the money was coming from. He just did it. The shelter staff noticed something strange. Ember responded best to Jack. Her tail would twitch when he entered. She'd lift her head slightly, even on her worst days. It was as if her body had given up, but her spirit hadn't. "She knows you," one nurse said. "She trusts you." Jack almost choked on the guilt that rose up. No, she shouldn't. But still he showed up, day after day, week after week. 3 weeks after Ember's rescue, something unexpected happened. A volunteer at the shelter was sorting through donated crates when she found a torn blanket inside. It had a bloodstain on it, and something else. Tiny paw prints. The vet was called in. "These aren't Ember's," he said. "Too small. These belong to a pup." Jack froze. A pup? She wasn't alone. Someone whispered. She had a baby. Everyone scrambled. They called rescue teams, rescanned the footage, reached out to the firefighters, and then 5 miles from where Ember had been found, they located a drainage pipe in the burned woods. Inside was a single puppy, alive, shaking, covered in soot, but alive. That changed everything. Ember hadn't just been trying to survive the fire. She'd been trying to save her baby. That's why she hadn't run. That's why she'd stood there, staring at Jack, refusing to move. Even as the flames came closer, she had been guarding the entrance to that pipe. She had been shielding her pup with her own body. And Jack, he had walked away from all of it. He had abandoned not just her, but a mother's mission. When the pup, named Ash, was brought into the shelter, he was terrified of everything. He refused to eat, refused to sleep alone. He was constantly looking for his mother. And Ember, she had gone into shock. Her condition worsened. Doctors said it was trauma-related, psychological, emotional. The vet took Jack aside. "She needs him." Jack blinked. "Who?" "Her pup. Let her see him. It might help." And so they did. Ash was brought into Ember's room and placed beside her crate. The second she caught his scent, Ember's eyes opened, wide. For the first time since the fire, she moved on her own. Her bandaged paw reached out. She whimpered. Ash squeaked in response and crawled toward her. The entire shelter watched in stunned silence. She licked his ear. He curled into her side, and that's when Ember let out a long, shaky breath and fell asleep, not from pain, but from peace. Jack watched it all, unable to speak. Something broke inside him, and something else began to grow. He realized then that redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about earning the future. He filled out the paperwork that night. He adopted both Ember and Ash. The shelter staff were stunned. "You sure?" one asked. "This won't be easy." Jack nodded. Neither was watching them suffer. Jack moved out of town, bought a small cabin near a lake. Quiet, safe, clean air. He rebuilt his life around 2 creatures who had every reason to hate him, but didn't. He watched Ember heal, day by day. Her fur grew back in patches. Her limp became less pronounced. She barked again. Ash grew faster, playful, curious, full of mischief. And Jack, he finally started sleeping through the night. But he never forgot what it had cost. Sometimes, life doesn't give you second chances. But sometimes it does. Not to erase what you did, but to let you do something better. And Jack did. He didn't become a hero, but he did become a man who stopped running. A man who chose to stay. It had been nearly 6 months since the fire. The world had cooled. The forest had begun to regrow. Tiny green shoots bursting through layers of blackened ash. But for Jack, something was still smoldering deep inside. A fire of a different kind. Not destruction this time, but purpose. Every morning started the same. Jack would pour a bowl of kibble for Ash, who had grown into a spirited ball of fluff, with more energy than sense. Then Ember, graceful but still scarred, would sit at the window, watching the trees sway. Her fur had come back in uneven patches, but her spirit had returned in full. Her eyes no longer held pain, only quiet wisdom. Jack had found a rhythm, a healing rhythm, but that peace was about to be tested, in a way no one could have seen coming. It began with a call. Jack was fixing the porch railing when his old flip phone buzzed. The screen read, "Hollow Creek Shelter." "Hello, Jack, it's Sarah from the rescue center. I wouldn't call you unless it was serious." His stomach tightened. "It's not Ember, is it?" he asked instinctively. No, Ember and Ash are fine. But there's a situation. Another fire, South Ridge, and what? We found a dog, a German Shepherd, injured. He won't let anyone near him. He's growling, biting. But when we tried to scan his tag, your name came up." Jack blinked. "What? You fostered him years ago, before the accident. Do you remember a dog named Rex?" The name hit Jack like a freight train. Rex. He hadn't thought about Rex in years. Before the fire, before the self-destruction, before everything. back when Jack was still part of the fire response unit, when he believed he could actually save lives. Rex had been his partner, a loyal K9, brave, disciplined, protective, until the day of the collapse. One rescue mission gone wrong. Jack made a mistake. Rex was trapped under a beam. Jack got out. Rex didn't, or so he thought. He had mourned him, blamed himself, quit the unit, vanished, and now they were telling him Rex was alive? Jack, Sarah asked gently. I'm coming, he said, already grabbing his coat. At the temporary shelter near South Ridge, the smell of burnt pine still lingered. Fire crews were packing up. News cameras blinked from across the road, but Jack had no eyes for any of it. He only saw the cage in the corner. Inside, a massive dog, fur matted and one ear torn. His chest heaved in slow, pained breaths, and when Jack stepped into the room, Rex snarled, but then he stopped. Jack dropped to his knees. It's me, boy. I thought you were gone. Rex stood slowly. His tail didn't wag. His ears didn't perk. He limped forward, one slow step at a time, and then he collapsed into Jack's chest. Jack spent hours with Rex in the medical unit. Flashbacks ripped through him, of that day, the falling debris, the radio silence. The guilt poured out. I left you. I left you to die. I was a coward. But Rex didn't judge. He licked Jack's wrist. That simple touch did what years of therapy couldn't. It broke Jack open, but not in a painful way, in a cleansing one. Jack had been given a second chance once, with Ember. Now he was being given another. When Jack brought Rex home, he was worried. Ember had been through hell. Would she feel threatened? Would Ash? He opened the cabin door, bracing himself. Ember approached slowly, her eyes sharp and cautious. Rex held his ground, respectful still. And then, Ember nuzzled his shoulder. Not just acceptance, recognition. They both bore scars. They both understood pain. Ash, of course, did what puppies do. He bounced on Rex's tail and promptly got growled at. But it was a soft growl, the kind that says, "Fine, you annoying furball, but only this once." The cabin changed after that. It wasn't just a healing space anymore. It became a sanctuary. Jack, Ember, Rex, and Ash, for souls stitched together by fire and forgiveness. Word spread. People who had lost pets in disasters started reaching out. Jack, can you help us find our dog? We heard what you did for Ember. We saw the footage. Are you the guy from the fire? And Jack didn't say no. He couldn't. With Ember by his side and Rex leading the way, Jack founded an organization, Ashes to Hope, a rescue initiative for animals caught in wildfires and natural disasters. He gathered a team of volunteers, medics, ex-firefighters, and search dogs. He trained with Rex again, this time as equals. And Ember, she became the symbol of their mission. Photos of her stood on every brochure, every flyer. The caption read, "She was left behind, but she never gave up. Now we won't either." One day, Jack got a call from a fire unit 2 towns over. "We need help. We think a child is trapped. We've cleared most of the site, but a service dog's gone missing, and he keeps trying to lead us somewhere deeper into the zone. It's dangerous terrain." Jack loaded the van with gear. He brought Rex, of course, but Ember insisted on coming. She wasn't just healed. She was ready. The forest was a nightmare. Smoke hung thick. The ground was unstable, but the dog Hero, a Labrador, kept barking, circling one area over and over. Rex sniffed the air, then took off. Jack and Ember followed, deeper and deeper until they reached a sinkhole, collapsed trees forming a crude tunnel. Inside was a little girl, alive, barely, clutching a melted leash. "Hero wouldn't leave me," she whispered. They pulled her out, and as news spread, a photo went viral. Jack holding the girl, Ember standing guard, Rex and Hero flanking them like warriors. Ash peeking out of the van, the caption, "The fire couldn't stop them. Love never does." Back at the cabin, Jack watched the girl's family embrace her. News outlets flooded in. Donations poured into Ashes to Hope. And for the first time in his life, Jack didn't feel broken. He felt whole. Not because he was a hero, but because he had finally stopped running from the fire and started walking through it with others beside him. 6 months later, the forest that once screamed with fire now whispered with new life. Tiny green leaves pushed through ash-covered soil, nature gently reclaiming what had been stolen. Birds had returned. So had deer. Even the scent in the air had changed, from acrid smoke to pine and rain. But it wasn't just the forest that had transformed. Jack had too. Gone was the hollow-eyed man who once watched the world from a dark cabin. The man who had let his guilt bury him, who believed he didn't deserve another chance. In his place stood someone new. Every morning, Jack woke up with purpose, not just to feed Ember, Rex, and Ash, but to fight for every voiceless animal out there still waiting for someone to see them, still waiting for rescue. His organization, Ashes to Hope, had grown from one man's desperate mission into a lifeline for animals and families across the state. Ember's coat had finally grown back in. Not perfectly. There were still patches of scarred skin, but that didn't matter. She walked taller now, no longer flinching at the sound of thunder, no longer hiding during the windstorms. She had found her voice and her job. She became a therapy dog for burn victims, especially children. Her calm eyes and slow nuzzles brought comfort in places sterile and silent. Once, Ember had been the one waiting behind a wall of fire for someone to care. Now, she was the one standing on the other side, offering hope to others. Rex was older now, slower, but there was still a fire in his eyes. After surviving abandonment, injury, and isolation, most dogs might grow fearful or aggressive. But Rex, he chose loyalty again. Everywhere Jack went, Rex followed, whether it was a town hall speech, a late-night phone call to a family who had just lost everything, or a daring rescue in unstable terrain. They had become a team again, but this time, it wasn't under a badge. It was under something bigger. Redemption. Ash, the playful mutt with more energy than sense, had also grown. While Rex and Ember handled the heavy lifting, Ash brought the joy. He made kids laugh during community fundraisers. He rolled over for belly rubs at school assemblies, and he had a talent for sniffing out food in places no one thought to check. But one moment truly proved Ash had inherited more than just scrappiness. There was a fire at a storage unit in Pine Bend. It wasn't a forest fire, but an arson case. Firefighters cleared the building, confirmed no people were inside, and were about to call it when Ash started barking, wild, frantic, nose pressed against a small drainage pipe at the base of the wall. Jack knelt down. "Is someone in there?" Ash barked again, then dug. They followed his lead, and behind a stack of charred boxes, curled up in a corner, was a mama cat and 3 newborn kittens, barely alive. Ash had saved them. The story made national news. Jack started receiving letters, hundreds of them, from children who wanted to become animal rescuers, from fire victims who'd lost hope but found it again through Ember's story, from veterans who felt understood after watching Rex rejoin the fight. One letter, in particular, stood out. It read, "Dear Mr. Jack, I used to be scared of fire. I lost my dog Max in one, but when I saw Ember's face and heard about how you saved her, I stopped having nightmares. I asked my mom if we could rescue a dog too. Now we have a puppy named Flame. Love, Zoe, age 7. Jack cried when he read it, and for the first time in years, those tears weren't about what he had lost, but about what he had helped build. Jack's old cabin had always felt like a shelter from the world, a place to hide, but now it became something different. Together, with volunteers from Ashes to Hope, Jack rebuilt it, made it bigger, added a training center for rescue dogs, a fenced play area, solar panels. It wasn't just his home anymore. It was a sanctuary for animals who had nowhere else to go. And painted above the entrance, on a wooden sign burned by hand, were the words, "Every life matters. Every spark can start healing." At the state's annual firefighter and animal rescue conference, Jack was asked to speak. He stood on stage in front of hundreds, his hands shaking, Ember sitting by his feet, Rex at his side, Ash gnawing a toy under the podium. He looked out at the crowd, then said quietly, "I used to think fire only destroyed, that it took and never gave back, but I was wrong. Because it was fire that brought Ember into my life. It was fire that showed me the cracks in my soul and gave me a reason to fix them. And it was fire that gave me a second chance, not just to save lives, but to finally live mine." He got a standing ovation. Behind the sanctuary, Jack built a small garden. There were stones with names etched in them. Dogs, cats, even horses and birds. All animals lost in fires. Some he had known, others had died before help arrived. Each time Jack saved a life, he added a stone. He believed those lives mattered, even in death, especially in death. One stone sat at the center. It read, "To the dog I thought I lost, but who found me instead, Rex." Jack placed a paw print in clay beside it. Ashes to Hope expanded beyond the state. Branches opened in California, Oregon, Colorado. Australia even reached out to partner after a record-breaking bushfire season. Volunteers signed up in droves, not just to rescue, but to train, to comfort, to teach. Schools invited Jack and Ember to talk to kids about fire safety, animal kindness, and healing. Documentaries were made, donations poured in, but Jack stayed the same. He still slept in the cabin, still walked the forest trails with his dogs, still paused to breathe the mountain air and whisper thank you to the sky. He didn't want fame. He wanted to keep saving lives. 3 years after Ember's rescue, a fire broke out on the edge of a mountain town. Ember was getting older, Rex even more so, but Jack went anyway. He always would. As the team sifted through scorched rubble, Ember froze. Her nose twitched. She took off. Jack followed, and there, hidden in a collapsed basement, was a toddler, alive, clutching a small stuffed animal. Ember had found him. It was her last rescue. She would retire after that, deservedly so. Jack looked out one evening as the sun dipped behind the trees. Ember lay beside him, her chin on his shoe. Ash and Rex wrestled in the grass. Birds chirped from the fence line. It wasn't just peace. It was legacy. Jack realized then, he wasn't just someone who had saved dogs. He was someone saved by them. And because of that, he would spend the rest of his life paying that debt forward. Not out of guilt, but out of gratitude. Fire can destroy, yes, but it can also refine. It can burn away everything false, leaving only what matters. Love, loyalty, second chances, the things fire can't touch. If this story moved you, if you felt something when Ember cried for help, when Rex chose love again, or when Jack rebuilt his life from the ashes, then don't let it end here. There are real dogs out there right now, trapped, abandoned, waiting behind walls of fire, pain, or fear. And they don't have someone like Jack yet, but they could. You can be that person. Support your local animal rescue. Adopt, don't shop. Donate to wildfire animal response teams. Share this video, because you never know who might watch it and feel the pull to act. And finally, if you have a pet lying next to you right now, maybe one who was once broken or scared, give them a little extra love tonight. Because just like Jack said, sometimes you don't save the dog saves you. Subscribe to Paws and Claws for more stories like this, raw, real, and full of heart. And hit that bell, because the next story might just change your life too.